Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name's Kara-Leah, and I wanted to talk into something I've been feeling into after a few conversations this weekend around the light and the dark. I notice in the spiritual world that there's often a propensity to identify with the light workers, etc., and to reject or demonize the dark. So I was part of a conversation on the weekend, and this was happening in that conversation. And what I noticed was the rebellious part of me that wanted to kind of poke holes and examine the underlying assumptions and, I guess, offer view teachings from Classical Tantra. But this is just a social conversation. And one of the knife's edges, I guess, I'm sitting on is how to engage in a conversation like that when I don't agree with the underlying assumptions. Because what I notice is when people are talking, they're assuming that I perceive and agree with their particular construct of reality. And there's an assumption that that particular construct of reality is correct or right. And this is a dance that I'm learning, because it's not that the person is wrong either and that I'm right. Because if I start to operate from that perspective, then I'm still perpetrating this idea of right or wrong or better or worse or hierarchy, superiority, etc. So I'm noticing this, dynamic unfolding. And what I noticed was that I attempted to be light and to be playful, to kind of poke holes and to own what was coming up for me, which is that I welcome the dark and I totally go and adventure in the dark. And I recognize that what I am is beyond light and dark. I recognize that what I am is neither the light nor the dark, but that which contains or holds both of these things. And I think this is the place where quite often people get stuck or caught on the spiritual path, particularly if they haven't necessarily received cohesive view teachings from a specific wisdom tradition. There's a lot of hodgepodge out there. There's a lot of spiritual kind of new agey, occulty, like all this mixture of stuff that's often coming from an unexamined Christian base. And Christianity, of course, is very much like the construct that Christianity operates within is very much about the light and the dark and the good and the bad, the good and evil, the fall, etc. And so often people have consciously rejected Christianity, but they haven't recognized the deep layer of conditioning that living in what is in essence a Christian construct has embedded in them, right? So yeah, there's a couple of aspects here. One is doing my own work to self-inquire in terms of there's a part of me that I really enjoy having conversations with people that can see through the whole nature of it all and recognize it's all a construct. I hung out with a good friend of mine on Saturday night, and he's like that, he's freaking amazing. And in fact, blessings, oh my God, he was pointing out where I was fucking attached and stuck with particular things, and I could feel a little part of me getting the defensiveness would slightly arise, and I'm like, oh shit, that's attachment to I self there. And so it's such a gift to have that interaction with him. Okay, where am I going with this? It's it's social interactions for me, learning how to dance in the dance, being what I am, not pretending, not wearing a mask, being really loving and open and compassionate of where other people are, but also, these assumptions that we make that this is how reality is aren't true. They're just not true. So from a classical tantric perspective, You know, if you talk about the light and the dark, you could talk about duality as such. You could talk about the form and the formless. There's many ways to talk about the elements that make up this reality. And from the classical tantric perspective, that which we are, the unconditioned, this is another way to describe awareness or Shiva nature or the joy of being or essence nature, all of these words that point at the thing which we actually are. And so when we're self-realizing, which is the path, what we're realizing is the self that we actually are, which is essence nature, awareness, the unconditioned, you could say, the eternal, infinite, unchanging aspect of beingness. And that, the unconditioned, it has no conditions, it has no attributes. And it's the thing that contains everything. So it contains the light and the dark. Both of these things must exist in order to create a world of form, a world that is by its inherent nature conditioned, a world that has limitations, right? And yeah, just feeling into light and dark. You know, what do we mean by the dark when we talk about the dark? I've done, like, for me, I've done a lot of work around sexual abuse in the last 2 or 3 years. And that work has involved the recognition of a continuum of experience. So one of the teachings in classical tantra is continuity, that everything is ultimately continuous, right? And so the recognition that the moment I vilify or demonize or another, right, the one who has enacted behaviors of sexual abuse, for example, and I decide that they're bad or evil as a person, then I'm actually failing to see and discern what is the nature of reality. The recognition that these are behaviors, that this is a level of conditioning, and that it is not actually who the person is ultimately. You know, who the person is the unconditioned as much as I'm the unconditioned. And if I can connect with a person who has abused others, for example, from that level of unconditioned, while still not condoning their behavior and not condoning their conditioning, and if necessary, taking appropriate reactions in response to that behavior or conditioning, but staying connected and staying in love with all of reality, including that person. And as part of doing that work, like to really open myself up and feel that, you know, it's like I had to go into any part of me that was rejecting or othering, or, you know, and this is a felt sense, this is an embodied sense of tuning into the sexual abuser, the rapist, the pedophile, and tuning into them so deeply and literally feeling how, if circumstances and conditioning were different, that could have been me. But it's not, because the circumstances and conditioning. Now, this is what I mean by going into the dark. Like, people would say that someone who sexually abuses, who rapes, or who enacts pedophiliac behavior, that person is dark. There's a darkness, there's an evil. And I'm like, I want to meet it directly. I want there to be no boundaries between me and that. And the recognition that when I surrender into that no boundary place of the unconditioned that holds everything, that is the process of realizing the self, right? Because when there is identification with the light, as if the light is who we are, there is an inability then. That's where we get stuck. It's where we get attached, and therefore we're not able to realize that which we actually are. Now, I'm not suggesting that any of you do that kind of work or do that kind of practice. Within Tantra, teachings and practices are not universal and absolute, right? Teachings and practices are specific to the person at a particular time when it is necessary. The only reason I'm sharing this is because it is an example of how I have worked with the dark as such. And I'm not afraid, I'm willing. And in fact, you know, there's a part of me that likes the intensity or something, and I just want to own that. It's funny, I'm actually dressed, here's me all in black today. Okay. So where this is relevant is that if you are a dedicated person on the spiritual path, if your genuine desire is to self-realize, to realize the self beyond all conditions, to know that which you are, which is eternal, unchanging, infinite, that this is something to be aware of, this is something to inquire into, and this is something to notice. Do you identify with the light and reject the dark? Okay, I think that's all I got for you today. Blessings on your journey, wherever you are on this path. And if you want some support on the path, you can totally sign up to my newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter where I just share what it's like for me walking the path as someone who is dedicated to self-realization. Blessings.